We all come from somewhere, and the voices we rely on to tell us where that somewhere is or was, and how we did or did not function in it, are generally writers' voices, those brilliant, uneasy recorders devoted to dismantling any preoccupation we may have about place, about the family, about home. Skeptical of the body politic in general, and in particular, with its rites and passages, its social laws and communal rights, the writers we return to again and again to explain where we've been or landed or where our country has been are those artists who do not turn away from who we are and why. For my part, I read and reread the poet Elizabeth Bishop, the better to understand displacement, atmosphere, and the longing for the queer home, the essayist and novelist James Baldwin, to understand how cities like New York can break your heart while ghettoizing your soul, and Joan Didion, who taught me that family was always part of the story, along with place, and how the writer's job was to face the terror, beauty, banality, and truth inherent in being a citizen of both. Always in her fictional work, there was what Elizabeth Hardwick called the, quote, disastrous surprises in the mother, father, child tableau, unquote. And those surprises, it seems to me, always ran parallel to politics, with its cronyism, makeshift families, fictions, and disasters. Joan, what could she mean when she wrote those stories about children disappearing, stories where lovers and fathers and daughters did unspeakable things to one another, and yet there was still our need for one another, for family, despite all, which gives so many of her characters a reason to live and dream some more, and accounts for the deep pathos in her novels. Looking back, I think Joan, like any great American author, was building a world, brick by brick, based on the world she knew, a universe founded on home or ideas about home and how it relates to oneself in the larger world. Always, always, she was interested in community, whether in her native Sacramento or in a devastated El Salvador, or in New York with its, quote, lazy criminality, unquote, and destructive narratives about race and women, or in Miami shaped by deals and the drama of exile. Time and again, Joan wrote about who we are and what we are, including how, as a nation, we live in a society peopled by citizens you may be related to or not, but who you are bound to in any case because we are Americans. We are all inheritors of a cracked, chaos-filled kingdom, one where the center does not hold, but you can learn something from fracture, if only you could face the cracks and fissures, which are the cracks and fissures of history. I've always liked the fact that Joan is the feminine form of John, and who knew her better than her husband, John Gregory Dunn, who wrote in his wonderful book, Monster, Living Off the Big Screen, that Joan was not someone you'd refer to as the little woman. She whom the doctors described in her book about John and grief as a, quote, cool customer. I think Joan's coolness, her not little womanness, has to do with her rejection of what women are often trained to do, to help before criticizing or swallow the criticism altogether. And I thank Joan's mother, Edwene, for encouraging her daughter's skepticism when she gave her 5-year-old Joan a writing tablet so she would stop complaining and write her thoughts down. The child who complains is the child who is uneasy with an accepted order, and I like to imagine Joan as a schoolgirl or in a sorority, the pleasant middle-class female joiner in the rights of her class, starting to squirm in her formal, the kind made of silk and tulle sometimes, pink or always white, as she started to not so much march away from the world she had known, but to write it down. That's the first trouble, describing your world and writing it down, because that means you are thinking, questioning your place in it. And here is Joan describing both in her essay, Notes of a Native Daughter. What happened in New York and Washington and abroad seemed to impinge not at all upon the Sacramento mind. I remember being taken to call upon a very old woman, a rancher's widow, who was reminiscing the favored conversational mode in Sacramento about the son of some contemporaries of hers. That Johnson boy never did amount to much, she said. My mother protested. Alva Johnston, she said, had won the Pulitzer Prize when he was working for the New York Times. Our hostess looked at us impassively. He never amounted to anything in Sacramento, she said. And so it goes, and so it goes. You mount to something in Sacramento or Zanzibar, or you do not. You're claimed as one of the tribe, or you are not. The point is to look at why these hierarchies exist in the first and second place, and why family is sometimes based on exclusion or whim or longing, and write it down in all its disasters and ideologies and joys, the better to tell us who you are and why always, despite the facts, you always end up wanting to go home to that place, no matter what you call it.